So very few people have actually watched any of these videos, so why am I even bothering? It's a subject which probably isn't going to interest most people. A lot of people aren't even going to give it a moment's thought. It's not going to seem at all practical. Okay, so let's look at our life experience. I occasionally come to this spot. Well, I come more often now than I used to. But when I first started coming earlier this year, I was walking up to it from along the river, and a couple of lads on a run overtook me, and when I arrived here they were here and we started a conversation. So in the end we ended up talking about the obscure subject of Rudolf Steiner and his Philosophy of Freedom, one of his seminal books. So, first of all, what are the chances of that happening? Secondly, my children went to the Steiner, and as part of my interest in their education, I went to a Steiner study group and studied quite a lot of the books, including this Philosophy of Freedom. It emerged at the end of the discussion that this young man I was talking to was in fact studying in Dornach, which is the sort of HQ of the Anthroposophical Society, which was founded by Rudolf Steiner. This was at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. So it's a remarkable coincidence. I mean, it's a remarkable coincidence in terms of timing and location. This young man had also just come back for a week from Switzerland to visit family, and he was going back on the next day. So many of us will have had coincidences which, you know, they seem to be meaningful, and you ask, well, what are the chances of that? And I think an observant person will not just sort of say, oh, it's purely chance, that they will tend to take the view that there is some cause beyond our immediate physical person, some reason why this event came about. And I imagine many people have had this kind of thing. So yes, I'm talking to people possibly about their personal experience. So from this personal experience, and also from, you know, general reading and attempting to understand life, I arrive at the conclusion that we do not exist as meat sacks with no connection with anything else, that in a sense we exist in a field. We exist in a field with other people, and we're in communication whether we know it or not, and that events, to some extent, well, the events organise themselves for us to walk into, in a sense. I mean, Jung talked about the collective unconscious, and he talked about synchronicity, meaningful coincidences. That may be a little bit different, but it all implies that there is a connection between us which isn't obvious, which isn't physical. So, okay, here I am, I'm speaking into a phone, and this will go up on the internet, or maybe it won't, it depends how it comes out. And I'm articulating thoughts that I take seriously. An aspect of this book which I mentioned, The Philosophy of Freedom, Steiner deals with the question of nominal thought and living thinking. Now, nominal thought is just basically where you're dealing with labels, you're discussing something in a rather dry, technical way. There's no real emotional engagement. It's just the machine sort of verbalizing stuff. Whereas living thinking, as I understand it, is sort of like involving the very matter of thinking, of thought. To use the Steiner model, and many other models, we're talking about higher planes where these things actually originate. In fact, it probably seems more accurate to see this body as an antenna, and that the mind doesn't just get generated in the brain, but that this antenna is the means by which the mind expresses itself, or the mind that is associated with us, or the emotions, or whatever it may be. That it's not from the brain up, it's from higher levels down, and you could call those levels spiritual, or you could call them dimensions. It's just a question of what model you want to use. So he also speaks of pure mental action as being a valuable exercise, because you're dealing with things at a higher level rather than trying to change them at a physical level, which is often very difficult. So how does this fit into our day-to-day lives? Well, I've been talking about the golden rule, and putting forward the idea that basically we need to work, that if we work towards the good, then we are automatically counteracting the activities of the evil. I think many of us would probably agree that there is a lot of evil going on at the moment. I mean, there always is, there always has been. So it's nothing new in that sense. It's just the modern way of doing it. One aspect of that evil, you might say, is that we can't trust the institutions not to lie to us anymore. So we also can't trust the media. I think many will have experienced this, that basically many of us realise that we've just been fed a diet of propaganda. So what's the purpose of this? It seems that you can basically, say, go on the internet and you can find opposite views on the same matter. And it's like this old selling technique where you offer the false choice. You say, well, you can have this and that's crap, or you can have this and that's good, and these are choices. Well, that they are not your choices. You have other choices. You have any other choice you can imagine, and you can also simply walk out on it. Now, the question in my mind is, why are they so intent on managing our perceptions? Because that's what it is. It looks very much as though they want us to take sides all the time, because if we take sides we never really stop and think, or we never get to the nub of the issue. I mean, okay, looking at recent issues, do we side with Ukraine? Do we side with Russia? Do we side with Israel? Do we side with the others? Perhaps in the end a lot of us are just sick of people being killed for well, just people being killed full stop. What's it all about? Women, children, you know, mass starvation, mass killings, and really what comes out of it for ordinary people at the end of that. These events seem to very much benefit certain, I mean, they're commonly called elites, but I would actually be inclined to call them parasites, because basically they're feeding off the suffering of the rest of humanity. There is an acronym, let us call them THEY, and THEY stands for the hierarchy exploiting you. And I think we all know that one way or another we are being exploited. We can't necessarily see the faces of that hierarchy. We can see the immediate faces, like the government and, you know, some of the players, shall we say, some of the front men. We see them, but we don't really see behind the scenes. We know that however we vote in an election, it seems that nothing changes, nothing gets better. It seems as though there is an agenda, and that agenda is to tax the hell out of us and take our freedom. So when have you ever heard of taxes being reduced? Or if they've been reduced in one area, then they're put up in another. I mean, the net effect is that we end up paying more taxation. So how does that work? Does that just go on forever until basically we're more or less handing over, well, we're already handing over the bulk of our income for taxation? I mean, when you look at both direct and indirect taxes and licenses and all these other necessary expenses if you want to live a reasonable civilized life. So it's a common experience. We know about that. It's just, if you have lived several decades, you may well ask yourself what has been gained, and very likely you ask yourself what has been lost, because life as I know it now is not as it was back in my youth. It's very much less free, and basically they're trying to regulate every aspect of our lives. I touched on this in the first video with regard to you know, compelled speech or forbidden speech and all that kind of thing. So it's very much in their interest to capture our attention, to capture our minds, to enslave us to the propaganda, because basically they are feeding off us. So we have to start from a certain point of view. People doing that are obviously, you know, they don't have our good at heart. And I think once we basically accept that they, the hierarchy exploiting you, are actually evil, and we understand that we can't negotiate with evil, then from that position we can start to get together and formulate solutions. While we are busy in the position of the supplicant, in other words, we appeal to some other party and we support another party to win an election, say. Has it really ever done any good? There is maybe a honeymoon period, and that honeymoon period is sort of dangerous because it means we take our eye off the ball. Meanwhile, the agenda rolls on, and once again nothing changes, and in all probability things get worse. So we have to look at that and say, well, it's just not working for us. So how do we start doing something that works? I mean, I have mentioned this golden rule to start shifting things towards the good, and to stop being used as tools in their game, to not be weaponized against our fellow man. This is, for the moment, it's my underlying premise that the way to fight the evil is actually to move towards the good and not play their game, basically. So this may seem a difficult thing to do, and it may seem, you know, a little bit fanciful in a way. And yet what good has it ever done you, sort of writing a letter to your MP or going on a demonstration? Okay, it's great fun maybe, and you get a feeling of unity, making comments on the internet. Does it ever really do any good? You're just venting, basically. So in a sense, what I'm suggesting is that I wouldn't say you were doing nothing, because of this aspect of living in the field, of being connected to other people, that even by articulating these sincere thoughts, I am having an effect on the field, however small that may be. So if we basically do get together with our fellow man in the actual flesh and actually start talking to each other and communicate sincerely, that we will eventually create a resonance which will start to influence other people. It is, I know it sort of sounds a little bit mystical, but once we start getting other people to discuss things in a sober and sincere way, for a start we find out who our allies are, or who our tribe is. I had a call about 3 weeks ago from, it was a cold call, and it turned into a 40-minute conversation with this very intelligent lady who understood exactly what I was talking about when I somehow managed to get a conversation going on the subject. And she was saying how this was also her experience with some of her friends. Once you start talking to people, you find out what other people are feeling and thinking. And it's possible that many more people than you imagine are feeling and thinking in the same way. And so, in isolation, okay, we just do it, we just think with ourselves, and maybe we don't make that much progress. It's the interaction with other people where ideas come to life. And so, firstly, I would suggest that people should get out and actually start talking to people in the flesh. And secondly, that we stop making choices to which we are being guided, or just stop taking sides. That's the thing. There's an old cartoon with the king standing on his battlements and the peasants are down below, and his advisor says to him, "Don't worry, all you've got to do is convince the people with the pitchforks that the people with the flaming torches want to take them from them." And that more or less sums it up. It's all about divide and rule. If we can get together with others and reach common ground, and they speak of the silent majority, well, that's who needs to speak, the silent majority. But in the end, I think it's going to be the more thoughtful people who are capable of the most of formulating ideas and translating them into action. We need to do something, but first we need to unite and shake off the blinkers